All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cracking the Code with the man, the myth, the legend, Robert G. Allen. Robert, so excited to talk to you today about a thing that I think is involved in everybody's life and envelops everybody's life at one point in time, and that is fear, right? And the thing that everybody wants to know is, some may be ridiculous fears, some may be warranted fears, but how do I overcome my fears?
I've taught you over the last many episodes in the podcast. You're going to learn over and over again there are three areas that you need to have skills in. You have to have skill in what I call system knowledge. That's how do I run this vehicle? How do I make this thing work? How do I buy options on the stock market? What are the systems and strategies for doing that? People skills and mindset skills. Now, of all my best, these books have sold millions and millions of copies, and predominantly they're system skills.
Okay.
They're like the 50 nothing down techniques, that's in nothing down. The system, finding, funding, farming, that's a system. Cracking the millionaire code. I mean, all of them have different systemized ways of organizing, making money, and laying it out so a person can follow it. Problem is, sometimes they don't have the people skills to pull it off, because if you want to make money, you have to involve people.
Yeah.
You have to be a leader somehow. You have to say, you can trust me with your money or your property or something. You got to trust me, and you have to have certain kinds of people and persuasion and negotiating skills, and that's a skill. We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the third skill, which is mindset skills, and that's how do you think?
Yes.
What goes on in your mind, and the mind is an imagination tool, and it projects the future. And therefore, your mind is designed to project your future and for you to map out a plan for you to get to the future you're imagining. Imagination is extremely powerful. One Dr. Emile Coué in the 20s, over 100 years ago, said, when the will comes in conflict with the imagination always carries the day. Actually, the exact quote is, when the will comes in conflict with the imagination, the imagination invariably carries the day. So translating that means, your will is when I want this,
right.
I will this, I will go get this, right? And if your imagination is in conflict with it means you can't imagine yourself doing it, or maybe even the opposite, imagine yourself doing the exact opposite of it. Guess which one invariably wins? Without varying, your imagination always wins.
Yeah.
Therefore, fear is imagination gone bad.
Okay.
It's simple.
Interesting.
When you are imagining something, a future event in the future, you're imagining a bad event, an outcome that is not good for you. That is what fear is. It's imagining something bad happening to you in the future. And now, where does that fear come from?
I think everybody wants to know.
Exactly. Were you born with it as a little baby?
No.
Some, yes.
Interesting.
Some are fear of falling and fear of loud noises and things of that nature. Yes, there are some we are inherently born with. And then there are shy people. Did they learn how to be shy by going to the shy school? No, we have certain personality types, yes, and that can fit all kinds of different ways of people growing up into all kinds of different types of people. And some of them will be more prone to anxiety and more prone to backing away, being more careful, more cautious. Numbers-oriented people, accountants and attorneys, things like that. In fact, attorneys, they are the most fearful people of all, because they look in the future and all they can see is fear.
Yeah.
All they can see is bad stuff happening. This bad thing could happen, and that bad thing could happen, this bad thing could happen. And they write out a contract that's 30 pages long with everything bad that could happen. The probability of that is very, very small. So some people grow up and they think that way. What I'm trying to teach you is, well, how did you grow up?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you grow up wanting to be financially free? Is that part of your mindset? Some people didn't grow up that way. They didn't want to be financially free. They wanted to work at a job, have somebody send them a salary for the rest of their life. That's the way their parents did it. That's the way their grandparents did it. They're not really interested in stepping outside into the fear zone. That's outside their comfort zone. into where it's risky. They want to be, and what I need you to do is to, as a bank ad, I saw a bank ad, I love this bank ad, it says step out into the risk. Or step out of the risk, they say, step out of the risk, and like step out of the rain. Well, I need you to step out into the risk.
Okay.
And it depends on who you are. Some people naturally do that. And entrepreneurs do that naturally because they are blinded to the penalty of failure. They have a thick skin, and they are willing to jump, and they're willing not to think about the consequences of a mistake.
Sure.
And therefore they are prone to jump. They just like to jump. They like to take risks. That's just the way they think.
Yeah.
And that's 1 in 7 of the people in our country. 6 of them are employee-minded. 1 is entrepreneur-minded. They like to take some extra risk. So do you fit into that category? If so, you'll use that as a strength. You'll say, this is just the way I think. It's the way I've always thought. I've always started little businesses. I've always been the leader. I've always wanted to grow this way.
Sure.
If you're an employee-minded person, this is going to be more difficult for you. Can you still be rich? Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. You can make it as a side hustle. Yes, you can. But you're going to have to deal with fear. Entrepreneurs deal with it a little less strongly than employees. But I'm going to ask you the question, what do you fear? And in a previous podcast, we talked about the 5 types of fears. I'll just cover it quickly. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of success. Those are the 5 biggies. Which of those is the one that you resonate with? You need to ask yourself that question. Why do I fear that? If it's fear of rejection, let's take that one for an example. When you look into the future, you look through the prism, through the shield, through the filter, and you look into the future, and if you are afraid of rejection, you say, I don't dare talk to that person because that person might reject me. I don't dare show my financial statement to the banker because the banker might reject me. I don't dare talk to the realtor because the realtor probably will think I'm a fool, And so we pull back into our shell, right?
Yeah.
How did we learn that? Do we learn it as a kid? Maybe. Maybe you had a few very bad rejection experiences. Maybe a girlfriend or a boyfriend shut you down and you've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
So sometimes from the past, we bring forward the pain of the past and we bring it into now and we see the future through the filter of our past pain.
Okay.
And so when we look in the future, all we see is pain. You see, there's rejection, there's rejection, there's rejection. And we literally are programmed to see the world through that filter. So I'm just going to ask you, what do you see the world through? What fears do you see the world through? If it was from a bad experience or 2 in the past, then you can recalibrate those experiences. You can remember them in different ways. You can learn from the pain that happened in the past. In fact, if it's still painful, you haven't learned yet.
Interesting. So, would that go along with like how we manage our fears? Or is that a completely different thing?
No, first of all, what are they?
Yeah.
How did I get them? And then the final piece is how would I manage that?
I think everybody wants to know, right? Like,
so the managing part is finding out which one you have. How much did it cost you? How much does it cost you over the last 5 years to have that fear?
Explain that to people. What do you mean? What does it cost you?
Well, suppose I go back 5 years and eliminated that fear today, or back then, 5 years ago. What would your life be like today? What more opportunities would you pursued? What people would you have talked to? How would your life be dramatically better today? Well, you'd probably make more money, you have better relationships, you'd have better health.
Yeah.
Your life would be better in all areas. So the question is, because you didn't get rid of that fear 5 years ago, there was a penalty. That fear was expensive. How much did it cost you? And now, if you don't drop it now, today, you're going to go into the future carrying that fear with you, which means every single day, because the future is always just a chain of days.
Right.
So every day is tomorrow, I'm going to wake up with that same fear.
Yep.
I'm going to look out at the opportunities around me, And instead of seeing money everywhere, I'm going to see rejection everywhere. I'm going to see abandonment everywhere. I'm going to see failure everywhere. I'm going to see people slapping my hand everywhere I look. So fear is very expensive. And therefore, we're spending just a short time on this podcast today to have you really, really think it through. What does it cost me? What if I do? How can I get rid of it? How can I manage it? How can I make it better? So if you can't get rid of the fear of, one of my fears was the fear of selling.
Interesting.
Totally petrified. Speaking to an audience, didn't dare sell my stuff. Couldn't do it. Why? Well, I don't know, tell you the truth. I just know I had that fear. And I had...
Could that double? I'm going to just interrupt you. Could that double? Could that be fear of selling, but maybe it's fear of rejection? Like maybe they wouldn't like your stuff, right? Like
that is the ultimate fear, the fear of people seeing me and looking at my appearance as I'm trying to persuade them, sell them, and have them go, I don't like this guy.
Yeah.
He's too pushy. And I said, I don't want to be like that. I'm not that kind of guy. I mean, and therefore I wouldn't even enter the space of selling because I couldn't sell and be authentic.
Yeah.
Until I finally learned that I can sell and be authentic.
How did you overcome that? Tell people how that was
I read
shifted.
a book called Influence by Cialdini.
Okay.
And it taught me there are principles of selling and persuading that I can learn even if I'm terrible. Even if I think I'm terrible, the principles always work.
Interesting.
Just like gravity.
Yeah.
I might think that I can fly, but when I jump off a cliff, the principle always works.
It always wins.
It always wins. So I have to align myself and my current beliefs with the principles so that make them work. So back to our fear conversation. How do you manage it?
Yes.
The best way to manage it is to turn your dreams, make them so intense, so strong, so real, that they overwhelm your fears. So most people don't spend any time on dreaming. If they do, it's at a surface level. They'll put a picture of a Porsche on their fridge and say, one day I want one of those, right? They never imagine themselves sitting in that Porsche or going to a dealership and actually smelling the leather. They won't go that far, and therefore their imagination isn't empowered.
Interesting.
So we said that imagination always overcomes your will. Well, part of the will is the desire to do what you really want to do. You have to make your imagination align with the things you want so you can imagine yourself in all five senses experiencing what it's like to enjoy the dream that you've been dreaming. In other words, go into the future and be there and experience it. Neville called it, don't think of your goals, think from your goals. This is very powerful statement,
That is.
very profound. Because most people who have set goals think of their goals. Not good enough. I need to go out into the future, imagine me living my ideal lifestyle. If I'm a real estate investor, how many properties do I own? How does that feel? What home do I live in? What's my life like? What's my relationships like? What's my health like? What's my time like? And I want you to imagine it, feeling it in all five senses. That's how you empower imagination. But most people don't empower it. They only give it one input. They only give it visual, a picture of this thing I would like. And they don't really experience it in all five senses. That make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say that obviously we're moving from the basis of fear, right, to how do we manage that fear? And now we're talking kind of at a high level of how we make our dreams more real than our fears. And so you have to become completely immersed in your dreams, right?
Yeah.
You have to make that a feeling where you, like you said, you smell the leather, because I agree. Like I can think right now at my house, there's vision boards in a couple rooms in my house.
Yeah.
But my assumption is that's where it stopped. My assumption is nobody in my family is living inside that next level.
Yeah. Vision boards are great. I'm not saying that they're just not enough.
Yes.
They're not leveraged. You know, I like leverage.
Yeah.
That means I put a little bit of effort and I get a lot of return for it. So when I leverage a vision board, it means I'm going to literally step up into that picture and I'm going to smell what it smells like. What kind of smells do I want to smell in my dream home?
Yeah.
What flowers, what perfumes, what do I want? What do I want to smell? What do I want to hear? What kind of music do I want to hear? What do I see on the walls of my dream home? I want to experience it in all 5 senses.
So I wonder, Robert, is there something that as we're talking about fears, and even more so as we're talking about how to turn them from fear, our fears into dreams, or vice versa, make our dreams more strong than our fears?
Yeah.
What's the simplest? We just talked briefly about vision boards and stepping into that. What's one way that we could begin to learn that technique and implement it in such a small way that we begin to get mastery of that? How can we do that? What's the first basic level step you'd recommend to people?
What I recommend people do is actually the first map of the 4 maps of my book called The 4 Maps, which means clarity.
Okay.
Clarity means, what do I really want? So I want to ask myself that question and get really specific. What do I want? Where do I want that? When do I want that? How much of it do I really want?
Yeah.
Who do I want that with? Why do I want that? And how am I going to get that?
Yes.
So the first chapter of that book talks about how you draw a map that literally installs your dream at a higher level, gives you leverage on your dream. So I literally draw a frowny face. What don't you want? What is it life like now?
Yeah.
And then in the future, a smiley face. And literally, I have them draw on a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, a smiley face. And I say, okay, tell me, what do you really want? In all areas, you want financial, relationships, health, time management, time orientation. What does that feel like? I want you to go into the future and imagine where you're living, how much of it is flowing to you because you're living there. What are your relationships like? That's the who. Go into the future and answer those 7 questions so that they become more real and they become more intense. And then you're thinking from your dreams, not of your dreams. Then imagine from the future looking back to today. Remember I said imagination is so powerful. Look back to today and imagine yourself the older, wiser, more scarred, maybe a few mistakes along the way, wizened guy, gal. And what would you say to yourself today?
Yeah.
If you could whisper into your self now, what is your future self whispering to you?
Yeah.
And there'll be sometimes some voices you hear in your head. We'll have to go into voices on another podcast where we go deep on that because there are a lot of voices that we're listening to in our mind constantly.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
So one thing that I've become keen, very mindfully aware of in working with you and with Chris and other wonderful mindset people is, and maybe we'll end on this, Robert, is talk to us about how we build the dreams that we want. We're coming out of our fears. We're starting to build the dreams that we want, but how limiting can words sometimes be? And how do we say the wrong words? Because oftentimes I've heard people say, I don't want debt.
Yeah.
I don't want this. I don't want that. And inevitably we get that because we're saying, we don't want that.
Because we're negating everything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So talk to us about a couple really good positive words that we can leave with, like some words that you're like, if you just shift these couple words or the way you say these, is there a way that we can lead us to success?
I'll give you a technique. Watch the news. And only watch a minute of it because it's too hard to watch. But watch the news and count how many negative words the announcer says as they're announcing the news. Just count them up in a minute. And how many positive words? Maybe record it and watch it back and forth. Go over that minute. How many positive words are they saying? And you'll find that predominantly the news is almost 90% negative.
Sure.
Why? Because it sells. Fear sells. Exactly. Positive news shows they're like, boring. I mean, show me something that's really dangerous, So I need you to notice what words come out of your mouth. And they're either going to be high energy words or low energy words. And if you start noticing your words that come out of your mouth, Well, watch this show and just take a minute of this right here and watch. We're talking about dreams and we're talking about hopes, and every once in a while I'll throw a fear in there because we're talking about fear. Therefore, we have some negative words in there. You're going to discover that most of the people around you, just like the news, are using negative words. They're describing their life in negative terms. And so rather than saying fear, I'd rather you say something like, less positive. So now I'm using a positive word.
Yeah.
So in other words, I am now conditioning my mind by watching the words I'm speaking to transform them into words that make me think positive.
Yes.
So when I think through my fear-based mind and my fear-based languaging, that's why my life is pretty ordinary. But if you transform your fear-based thinking into dream-based thinking, into dream-based talking, even the vocabulary that you use is just watch people talk. Just watch it. And you realize that sometimes you'll be around somebody and you go, I don't like to be around that person. I don't know why. And then you kind of notice the way they speak, and it's always like, this is wrong and that's wrong, and this is because, and there's an excuse, and you go, notice their languaging. If they just change their languaging from an excuse to something not so negative, in other words, you have to change all your negative words into positive words. That's really hard to do.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do. So I'm just asking you I'm just teaching that's one technique that might work for you to start transforming the way you think into dream-based thinking instead of fear-based thinking.
I love it. Hey, you guys, you've been listening to Robert G. Allen. Thank you, Robert, for dropping the knowledge on us and helping us crack the code.